Hey everyone, how are you? And welcome back to my channel. A couple weeks ago, I was getting ready to record a response video to an interview conducted by Connecticut Valley Views last June. I had the introductory script written 2 months in advance and compiled articles about how to explain sexuality to children in a way that doesn't have to steer toward the talk about the birds and the bees. But when I found a recent video on the show's channel where its members of staff attended a Moms for Liberty forum in Avon to interview a couple attendees, I cracked. I just couldn't make the longer educational video quite yet. It'll be here soon because there's a lot that needs to be said about banning LGBT plus subject matter from public education, but this forum has allowed people that support that cause to come out in the light. Tampering with the education system to suit parental rights could lead to widespread dismissals of LGBT plus teachers in the states and an increase in bullying toward queer kids in schools. The CDC reported that mental illness and violence that youth in that demographic face occurs far more frequently than their heterosexual cisgender peers. Furthermore, adolescent students that identify as queer were 4 times more likely to make an attempt on their lives during the pandemic. While the data gathered did not account for prepubescent and younger children, they still experience isolation and bullying that could lead to them having these thoughts as they get older. For many of you that don't know what Connecticut Valley Views is, don't fret. I'll give a brief overview about the organization so you can get a better idea of what its mission is. So, Connecticut Valley Views is a guest interview series that was developed for community TV to educate and inform Connecticut residents regarding municipal leadership, current affairs, and political topics. Proof to the People is the show's byline, providing insight without bias into today's headlines and issues while generating a 360-degree perspective. Connecticut Valley Views' mission is to focus on topical subjects with high-profile guests. It believes that its format is a first in Connecticut as a proprietary public access pilot program, which has been very well received due to its content and guest diversity. It has been the recipient of 2 Pegasus Awards for its respective videos discussing child trafficking and an interview with a museum executive director about Theo de Pope Riddle's legacy. The show's credibility and passion for art history drove me to have high expectations that it stays true to the principle in its byline, and I am furious that it hasn't of late. Its host, Susan Petrocelli-Regan, is the founder and presenter for Connecticut Valley Views. According to her LinkedIn page, she was a senior marketing consultant that was employed at a UK-based company that manufactures and distributes alcoholic beverages to supermarkets. There she met with both sponsors and departments within the corporation to maintain its altruism for its consumers and coordinate in-kind donations to nonprofits. During her time with them, she gained over 17 years of experience in marketing and public relations. She would go on to apply her expertise from her career in her interviews with Connecticut's locals, employers, and politicians for her show. Susan took it a step further by running for governor in last year's gubernatorial election and invested an excessive amount of time in her campaign bad-mouthing the Democratic majority. Fortunately, she eventually lost the Republican nomination to Bob Stefanowski, who then lost to Ned Lamont, which is great too because the former was keen on banning trans students from competing in sports and placing restrictions on sex education. I still appreciated that Mr. Stefanowski took his loss in stride by conceding defeat and calling Mr. Lamont to congratulate him. That's good sportsmanship that we don't see often in this climate. GLAAD defines Moms for Liberty as a cause that will organize, educate, and empower parents to defend their parental rights. Their advocacy has included calls for book bans, classroom censorship, and bans on teaching about slavery, race, racism, and LGBTQ people and history. Moms for Liberty claims to be a grassroots organization, but its founders and founding chapter have strong ties to high-ranking elected officials and national anti-LGBTQ groups, including the Heritage Foundation. It claims to have 135 chapters in 35 states. This means that tampering with the public education system puts racial and ethnic minorities in greater danger as well. Susan's inclusion of a word-for-word definition of terrorism along with Moms for Liberty's mission in the description of that video means that the reason why it's technically a hate group is lost on her. I know she's trying to be impartial and stay within the bounds of what is considered ethical in journalism, but she's not fooling anyone. The use of a quote from Adolf Hitler, another fascist leader with an ideology built on ethnic cleansing, on a Moms for Liberty newsletter for their Hamilton County chapter has done little to prove that they want what's best for young students. Yes, I know that chapter has since apologized, but their statement was calculating. Let's not ignore the elephant in that room. Lately, the guest diversity that Connecticut Valley Views is warmly received for has waned as the show began to shift into far-right territory and is actively promoting views that have gotten minorities and LGBT plus youth killed. Susan's attendance has made it cut and dry that their compassion for families has limits. The protesters outside the forum have every right to be furious. Connecticut is a state that's welcoming to marginalized groups, and an organization advocating for the restriction of life-saving information, let alone for entire groups of people to coexist in society, should not be part of that. Capiche? Of course, police were around to ensure the rally has remained peaceful as it should be. The participants were walking on thin ice just by showing up outside the senior center and vocalizing their disdain that the forum was allowed to take place at all. I'm glad that picketing the premises and celebrating inclusivity was all that they were doing. Both sides were exercising their rights of freedom of speech, though one wants to take away that right from minority groups, so it's no wonder Moms for Liberty, if you use the word liberty loosely, was met with hostility and why the forum's location was kept secret. If the protests had escalated into a full-blown riot, though, the right-wing politicians in Connecticut could easily use the incident as ammunition to endorse restrictions in public schools and crack down on peaceful demonstrations. Former President Donald Trump treated the Black Lives Matter movement as a joke because of vandalism that took place while some protests were going on in major cities. The Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project reported that 93% of protests that ignited in the wake of George Floyd's death were nonviolent, and vandalism that was identified in 220 locations where demonstrations have turned violent was confined to specific blocks instead of spreading out to an entire city. Be that as it may, what's stopping another prominent Republican leader from contemplating how they blow this scenario out of proportion? We'll go ahead and watch the interviews, but just a fair warning, the audio in that video is incomprehensible. When I first watched it, I couldn't make out part of the conversation between Susan and the interviewees. It was like listening to a radio in the car with a poor signal, and hearing the excess noise is overstimulating, so bear with me as I do my best to assess the answers given.
On Saturday, October 21st, 2023, Connecticut Valley Views attended a Moms for Liberty forum being held at the Avon, Connecticut Senior Center. What greeted host Susan Regan and executive producer and photographer Bill Regan was a throng of protesters who called the forum attendees terrorists and fascists. The word terrorist is defined as a person who uses unlawful violence and intimidation, especially against civilians in the pursuit of political aims. A significant police presence was evident on the premises. Inside the well-attended senior center, Manju Gerber, president of Moms for Liberty of Hartford County, led the forum. MFL is a group of parents seeking to realign the education system to support their values. The event included guest speaker James Stephen Lindsay, an American author and cultural critic. A panel discussion followed. As CTVV exited the senior center during a forum break and attempted to encourage free speech responses from the protesters, they were met with assaultive language and unresponsive dialogue. Thus, CTVV was unable to obtain any comprehensible sound bites. CTVV left the premises as it appeared that the crowd was trying to escalate their rhetoric to a more contentious.
It's obvious that Connecticut Valley View's decision to go inside the senior center did not sit well with the protesters, and frankly, I don't blame them. It's disappointing that they didn't give them a chance to chat with them, because when taken at face value, the reactions were unprovoked. In this case, I believe the show was at least trying to live up to its byline, but when I studied the situation closely, I realized that this chance could have been earned if Susan spoke with them in lieu of attending the event. Her summary of the scene on the premises contains subtle adverse language that portrayed the protesters as antagonistic when the truth is, her naivety about the impact that Moms for Liberty had in other school districts costed her their trust. The Hartford Courant reported that families with young children, specifically those that are gay, attended the protest as well. One mother with an autistic son expressed concerns that he's scared he might not read his favorite books again. That reminds me, I first heard of Connecticut Valley Views back in 2013 when I interviewed the director of the Focus Center for Autism, Donna Swanson. I thought that video was elaborate and communicative about its mission to nurture the growth of autistic individuals based on their special interests. It's like a gardener tending to a flower that they expected to bloom in the summer, but has found that it is vigorous in the autumn months. Donna gave detailed responses to Susan's questions regarding her background in psychiatric nursing, and I love that she says she doesn't believe autism is a disorder and instead prefers to address an individual with that condition as creatively wired. As someone who's autistic myself, that put a smile on my face. With that being said, Susan's decision to attend the Moms for Liberty Forum and get a rise out of parents whose kids' futures are at stake is a huge injustice to that prior interview.
To a more contentious.
I'm Susan Regan. I am host of Connecticut Valley Views, and we are here today at the Avon Senior Community Center for a very special event that is being held for Moms for Liberty. And I'm here with Kristen Stock. And Kristen, give us a little bit of your background and how you're to be a panelist today.
Well, Susan, I'm just an average nobody in life with a not so ordinary medical mental health condition of sexual identity disorder. And under my medical mental health providers, I transitioned to live as a woman. I realize your biological sex hasn't changed. What I see is a transgender to trans queer ideology movement. This is encouraging kids to transition. This is appropriating women. And I'm here with LGBTS United. We're a brand new organization, and we have our first public statement I can share with you. We at LGBTS United stand with parents and parental rights groups to call for an end to DEI curriculums in government public schools, as well as to end the sexualization and medical transition of minor age kids. In addition, we condemn gender transition that emanates outside the home and done without parental knowledge and consent.
You have run into some walls when it comes to being a transgender woman because you are conservative.
There's one truth of the matter, Susan. Interrupting a child's puberty is gambling with their long-term future health. And we at LGBTS United not can sit by quietly and let it happen. Once you go down the medical road, there's no return. You don't even need surgery. I'm on hormone replacement therapy. People say you pretend to be a woman. Well, my breasts here, I can't take them off at night. A surgeon, I need a double mastectomy to do so. These are life-altering medications. You must be absolutely sure if the person is at that state of dysphoria is high enough to go down that road. I think with Russian children, or Russian people in general, there's not enough mental health care involved. They're getting pushed through in this symptom, especially our children.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your time.
I may be a little too obsessed with Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'm a huge fan of the show that was fortunate to have met some of its cast members in virtual meet and greets during the pandemic. But the second episode in Book 3 has a storyline where Aang is mistaken for a truant kid and is enrolled in a Fire Nation school. He sees it as an opportunity to not just be a kid again, but to go undercover and gather information that will benefit his team as they make their way toward the capital. At the school, he was dumbfounded to learn that his classmates were taught that the air nomads were the aggressors in the 100-Year War. When asked a question about the infamous genocide during a quiz, Aang pointed out that the nomads lacked a formal military and that Fire Lord Sozin ambushed them. It left the students in shock because it went against what they were previously taught, and the teacher was in disbelief that he had this knowledge.
Question 1. What year did Fire Lord Sozin battle the Air Nation Army? Kuzan?
Is that a trick question? The air nomads didn't have a formal military. Sozin defeated them by ambush.
Well, I don't know how you could possibly know more than our national history book. Unless you were there 100 years ago.
I'll just write down my best guess.
Similarly, when the Nazi Party rose to power, schools in Germany had their curriculum heavily adjusted and fairy tales were appropriated to fit their ideology. Textbooks used for lessons would have to be approved by the Third Reich, and fast forward to the present-day U.S., Moms for Liberty. That was the message I got when I watched Susan's interview with Miss Rebstock. Like how they want to reform public education to conform to family values, which is too abstract of a concept because taxes paid by families, regardless of their political affiliation, also keep these schools open. The Nazis' objective is to get rid of critical thinking and teach children to blindly see the world in their eyes, aka the Aryans are the greatest of all races, and that other groups of people, Jewish, queer, or otherwise, have no place in their ideal society. That meant educators that fit in the demographic the Nazis targeted, and those that opposed their beliefs were let go on the spot. And Miss Rebstock decried the Hartford Courant article I cited as a hit piece because she's ticked that the protesters were actually practicing what they preached, while she is spewing hate towards the trans community, both at the forum and on Twitter. Identifying as a trans person yourself does not give you the right to be cruel to other individuals in that group by advocating to restrict access to books that help them feel seen. While it is not possible at the moment for sex chromosomes to be reconfigured, it does not exempt you from denying that trans women are women and trans men are men, because gender is a social construct, and I won't allow you to put youth in that demographic in harm's way. That includes demanding that pride flags be removed from public places. You might hate it, but a person struggling with their orientation and identity may feel supported. But that sentiment is a load of crap to Miss Rebstock, because according to this meager yet misleading statement she tweeted last September and in her interview with Susan, interrupting a child's puberty is gambling with their long-term future health. That's incorrect. Preventing trans kids from getting the medical help they need to be who they are is gambling with their mental health, and I'm gonna tell you why. An article written by two Associated Press journalists that PBS published reported that gender-affirming care has been restricted or outlawed in 20 U.S. states, forcing families of trans children to shoulder pilgrimages to states where it's accessible. In U.S. society where Roe v. Wade is non-existent, abortion and gender-affirming care are legal in Connecticut. I've seen stories on Facebook about women temporarily or permanently traveling to other states with cover stories that they're going on vacation, but they're looking for healthcare providers that can legally help them terminate their pregnancies. Likewise, guiding trans kids through life's obstacles has become even more emotionally and financially burdensome for parents in affected states. It is particularly dire when their fellow parents and conservative politicians outright accuse them of child abuse in an effort to break up these families. Wow! It's a wonder why Moms for Liberty fell flat in this year's school board elections. The stigma trans individuals face is worse than their gay, lesbian, and bisexual peers, and at the dumpster fire of a forum, Miss Rebstock was disconcertingly comfortable with reinforcing it by stating that kids are transitioning without their parents' knowledge and that they're too young to be making that decision, which, as I said, couldn't be further from the truth. My assertion is backed by Planned Parenthood in an article on their website that explicitly stated that a child is exposed to gender norms the second they're born. Picture a doctor saying, "Congratulations, it's a boy," and "Congratulations, it's a girl." By the time children are 3, they can pinpoint their own gender. Additionally, some trans youth have said the bans on gender-affirming care in conservative states has sent them a message that they aren't welcome, and thus continuing to live in these states under these oppressive laws will suffocate them. That doesn't sound like protecting children to me. I'm just putting that out there. If Matt Grotsky can develop feelings for his wife, Laura Shield, as early as preschool, then trans and non-binary kids are capable of understanding and naming their gender identities. Children are more curious than we give them credit for, so it is their parents' responsibility to determine how they want to nurture it, whether it's allowing them to pick out whatever toys they want, or sign them up for after-school activities that they're interested in. Reinforcing gender stereotypes by teaching them something like boys can't play with dolls will hinder their abilities and confidence to be successful when they grow up. I know that transitioning is a life-changing decision that shouldn't be made lightly, but if that's what a child wants in order for their body to match the gender they identify with and ultimately be happy with themselves, people like Miss Rebstock are just going to have to deal with it, or leave LGBT plus children alone, because isolating them and passing it off as protecting their peers from corruption is cruel.
All right, Susan Reagan here again with Connecticut Valley Views, and we have one of the attendees who's at the event today, Moms for Liberty. And Kathleen, just tell us you're from what town?
I'm from Bethlehem, Connecticut.
Okay, all right, and you're here with a friend.
Yes, I'm here with a friend.
And tell us, you're obviously going to watch and listen to the panelists.
Yes.
And tell me the reason you came.
Because I want the information, more information, in regards to getting our schools back to what they were intended to be. I don't believe they are, and I have 3 grandchildren, and I see them struggling and hurting, this is different. I have a 9-year-old that between the pandemic and this has never been in a classroom that was like we remember.
Yes. Now, they're calling the group that's outside, they're rallying against, they're calling moms terrorists.
Yeah, I know. So are grandmas.
Well, that's true because you were moms and now you're grandmas.
That's right.
Well, what do you think? All right, so you're talking about academia.
What they're allowing, what they are inputting into our children, sexually, immorality, the whole gamut of where we've come in this country. And, I believe the country was founded on Christian values. I raised my children with that. I want my grandchildren to know it, and we have crossed too many lines.
So we are very interested very much here what happens today, and I know you'll be following them.
Yes.
And so we thank you very much for your time, and safe trip back to Bethlehem.
Thank you.
All right.
Do you mean the very same values that justified rounding up African tribesmen and enslaving them? What about forcing Native Americans out of their homeland after the first Thanksgiving at Plymouth, or unintentionally infecting them with smallpox? No one attending public schools needs to know the U.S. was founded on colonialism. Am I right? God, I'd hate to be that woman's grandchildren. I took a second look at her facial expression when Susan brought up the claim that Moms for Liberty is a terrorist group, and I'm guessing her light laughter means she's either ignorant or, like the attendee's local hero, Miss Rebstock, has tweeted days later, she knows what Moms for Liberty is doing and believes the protesters outside the senior center have lost their minds. Call me a lunatic if you like, because judging from the word-for-word definition of terrorism Susan used in the description of her video, I can believe it. A Moms for Liberty chapter quoting Hitler in a newsletter and endorsing laws that might normalize discrimination against minorities doesn't have me convinced that they care about families. This is excellent timing that I'm recording this video on Transgender Awareness Week, and that my Alumni Matter posted this beautiful photo of the clock tower on their social media pages, because condemning discrimination and fear-mongering against the trans community is a stand we need to take now more than ever. This is coming from the fact that I never lived in a strict religious household, but this woman and I don't see eye to eye on what Christian values are. Based on how I was raised as a Protestant and from going to church when I was younger, these values are about helping those in need and recognizing that there are people in our communities that are worse off. I started working in retail during the pandemic not just to make the best of that crisis, but to assist people enduring economic hardship. Sure, it's a difficult, taxing job, but the most agonizing part of it of all was a customer telling me that they don't want an item because they can't afford it. We don't need religious piety and heteronormativity harped on kids in public schools, when what they really need is first-hand experience. Though the results of this year's school board and local elections have kept my head up a bit since I started recording this video, I am horrified that this debate is still circulating in the education system. The United States may have been founded exclusively on patriarchal values, but a blend of cultures, values, and ethnicities from across the world is what truly helped our country thrive. Watering down historical events so your children don't have to learn about how your ancestors did this country wrong and what they can do to fix their mistakes isn't a Christian value. I'm a history dork. I love reading about it not because it feels good or see for myself that Disney took creative liberties by turning Pocahontas into a fabricated love story, but because they document events that shape the society we live in now in a way that keeps me engaged. As early as elementary school, I vividly remember that my class watched a movie that depicted a black man being whipped by a slave owner, and I think in 5th grade, the school did an assembly where a choir sang "The Bus Ride to Freedom." We knew, as a 5th and into 6th grade class, that Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. were treated differently because of their skin color, and as a result, we knew why they went through hell advocating to desegregate public spaces. Learning these harsh lessons on racism were distressing for me at first, but they taught me to become an accepting individual and recognizing these were, and currently are, real issues people faced. Activists that have made the same arguments against book bans I just made were accused of grooming kids by their right-wing colleagues and opponents. Soon after, Michigan Senator Mallory McMorrow discovered that fellow senator Lana Theosis hit her with that accusation, she gave an impassioned speech to clear her name in the Senate floor and shut down that claim by stating what upholding Christian values are really about.
I didn't expect to wake up yesterday to the news that the senator from the 22nd district had overnight accused me by name of grooming and sexualizing children in an email fundraising for herself. So I sat on it for a while wondering why me. And then I realized, because I am the biggest threat to your hollow, hateful scheme. Because you can't claim that you are targeting marginalized kids in the name of, quote, parental rights if another parent is standing up to say no. So then what? Then you dehumanize and marginalize me. You say that I'm one of them. You say she's a groomer. She supports pedophilia. She wants children to believe that they were responsible for slavery and to feel bad about themselves because they're white. Well, here's a little bit of background about who I really am. Growing up, my family was very active in our church. I sang in the choir. My mom taught CCD. One day, our priest called a meeting with my mom and told her that she was not living up to the church's expectations and that she was disappointing. My mom asked why. Among other reasons, she was told it was because she was divorced and because the priest didn't see her at Mass every Sunday. So where was my mom on Sundays? She was at the soup kitchen with me. My mom taught me at a very young age that Christianity and faith was about being part of a community, about recognizing our privilege and blessings and doing what we can to be of service to others, especially people who are marginalized, targeted, and who had less, often unfairly. I learned that service was far more important than performative nonsense like being seen in the same pew every Sunday or writing Christian in your Twitter bio and using that as a shield to target and marginalize already marginalized people. So who am I? I am a straight, white, Christian, married, suburban mom who knows that the very notion that learning about slavery or redlining or systemic racism somehow means that children are being taught to feel bad or hate themselves because they are white is absolute nonsense. No child alive today is responsible for slavery. No one in this room is responsible for slavery. But each and every single one of us bears responsibility for writing the next chapter of history. Each and every single one of us decides what happens next and how we respond to history and the world around us. We are not responsible for the past. We also cannot change the past. We can't pretend that it didn't happen or deny people their very right to exist. I am a straight, white, Christian, married, suburban mom. I want my daughter to know that she is loved, supported, and seen for whoever she becomes. I want her to be curious, empathetic, and kind. People who are different are not the reason that our roads are in bad shape after decades of disinvestment, or that healthcare costs are too high, or that teachers are leaving the profession. I want every child in this state to feel seen, heard, and supported, not marginalized and targeted because they are not straight, white, and Christian.
Moms for Liberty can claim that the removal of critical race theory and LGBT+ literature from schools protects kids, but professors of gender studies, queer authors, and parents that don't want control over every aspect of their child's education have found that the organization's goal achieves the furthest thing from what the bans actually protect are abusive figures of authority. By leaving students intellectually defenseless, they might not recognize dehumanizing, inappropriate behavior, and even if they could, their schools won't have the resources to help them do anything about it because they won't be allowed to provide them. Susan, if you're confused about why the protesters outside the senior center branded Moms for Liberty and the former attendees as terrorists, there's your answer. I hope that clears it up for you. Discomfort with an entire group of people existing and refusing to educate kids about it due to that discomfort are true signs of bigotry. That is where I'm going to end this video because I'm already appalled that Connecticut Valley Views has given this organization a platform. It's unforgettable walking to my environmental science class in community college to see my professor visibly distraught that Donald Trump won the 2016 presidential election. It's harder to see a 13-year-old kid confiding me on Reddit that his homophobic dad beats him, and that I had to take responsibility as one of the only adults he trusted by advising him to report it to his dorm parent. He's safer at his boarding school, but he misses his sisters while simultaneously dreading going back home once every semester ends. It's an awful position for him to be in, and I hope he's doing better. Hey, I just noticed that one of the protesters in this photo was wearing a black long-sleeved Eras Tour t-shirt. That made me feel a lot more better about this. By the time I move on to my response video to the interview that Connecticut Valley Views conducted over the summer, I'll hopefully be more relaxed. If you've made it to the end, I appreciate you. Let me know what you think down below, and for my Connecticut viewers, be vigilant.